On the edge of a forgotten road, a 15-year-old boy lives with his grandmother, who carries secrets he could never imagine. Between his studies and taking care of her, one mystery remains. His father disappeared when he was just a baby, and his grandmother never speaks about his mother. But one ordinary afternoon, while tending to the fruit stand, something unexpected happens. A lost and disoriented girl appears on the road, and in that moment, the boy's fate is about to change in ways he could never foresee. "What's your name?" Nolan asked while watching the girl slowly regain her strength. She looked at him, still panting, her eyes confused but grateful. "Luna," she replied weakly, still holding the half of the orange Nolan had given her. "My name is Luna." Nolan watched her with concern. She seemed lost, her hair disheveled and her clothes dirty with dust, as if she had been walking aimlessly for a long time. He knew something was very wrong, but for some reason, she didn't seem able to explain what had happened. He tried to remain calm despite the growing anxiety in his chest. "Do you live around here?" he asked. Luna shook her head, her face still pale. "No. I was with my father, but I don't know where he is." Her voice began to tremble, and Nolan realized that, besides being physically weak, she was also scared. Nolan looked around, but the road was as deserted as always. No cars passed by and the sun was beginning to set on the horizon. He knew he had to act quickly. "Wait here," he said, running back to the tent. His heart raced. He needed help, and fast. He grabbed the old, worn-out phone they kept in the tent for emergencies. He called one of the neighbors, Mr. Samuel, a kind man who was always willing to help. "Hello, Mr. Samuel. It's Nolan. There's a girl here by the road. She's in bad shape. I think she needs help." After a quick explanation, Mr. Samuel promised to come immediately. Nolan returned to Luna, who was now sitting on the ground, still a bit dazed, but breathing better. "My grandpa is coming. He'll help get you to a safe place," Nolan said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're going to be okay." Luna looked at him with a mix of relief and fear. "Thank you. If you hadn't been here..." Her sentence trailed off, incomplete, but the weight of her words hit Nolan like a wave. He had never thought someone would depend on his help so much. The silence between them was interrupted by the sound of Mr. Samuel's old car approaching on the dirt road, kicking up dust. He parked next to the tent and hurried over, a serious expression on his face. "Is this the girl?" he asked, looking at Luna with concern. Nolan nodded. "She was nearly fainting when I found her." "All right, let's take her to the police station. They can help find her father," Mr. Samuel said, helping Luna up and into the car. Before leaving, Luna looked at Nolan, her eyes still teary, but there was a glimmer of gratitude in them. "Thank you again, I won't forget you." Nolan just smiled, waving as Mr. Samuel's car disappeared down the road. The weight of the situation finally began to settle on him. What had happened to Luna's father, and why had she been so far alone? Night fell quickly, bringing with it an unsettling silence. Nolan was left alone on the road, pondering what had just happened. He returned to the tent and began to take it down, but his mind was far away, full of questions and uncertainties. When he returned home, Grandma Helena was already sitting at the table, waiting for him with their usual simple dinner, vegetable soup and bread. She smiled softly at Nolan, but immediately sensed that something had happened. "You're quiet today, my son. Did something happen?" Nolan sat at the table, still thinking about Luna. He told his grandmother everything that had happened on the road, from the moment he saw the girl until Mr. Samuel arrived. Grandma Helena listened attentively, her hands resting over her bowl of soup. When he finished, she took a deep breath, looking at him with a mix of pride and concern. "You did the right thing, Nolan. You saved a life today," she said, her voice firm and caring. "Not everyone would have known what to do. I knew you had something special in you." Nolan felt the weight of responsibility in her words, but at the same time, a spark of hope ignited within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could really become what he dreamed of, someone who helps others, just like he helped Luna. But life in the village had always been full of twists, and Nolan knew that even with Luna's gratitude, the future was still uncertain. As he lay down that night, Her face continued to appear in his mind. Who knew what fate had in store for him? Sleep came slowly as he stared out the window at the starry sky. The road remained silent, but something inside Nolan was already beginning to change. He just didn't know how much yet. The sound of a glass falling to the floor broke the morning silence. "Grandma, are you all right?" Nolan asked, rushing to the kitchen. Upon entering, he found Grandma Helena leaning against the sink, breathing heavily, her trembling hands gripping the counter to stay upright. The glass she had been using lay shattered on the wooden floor. "I just felt a bit dizzy, my grandson." "Don't worry," she said with a weak smile, trying to hide her frailty. "It will pass soon." But Nolan knew something was wrong. Grandma Helena had never shown such clear signs of weakness before. Although she was an elderly woman, she had always been strong. He approached her, helping her sit down at the table. The worry in his chest grew. His heart felt tight, seeing his grandmother like this. "I think we should go to the doctor, Grandma." Grandma Helena shook her head, as stubborn as ever. "There's no need for that, Nolan. I'm old. It's normal to feel a little weak from time to time. Some tea and rest will fix it." She tried to smile, but Nolan noticed the paleness of her face and the slight tremble in her hands. Even though he was concerned, he respected his grandmother's wishes. He knew insisting would only make her more stubborn. But throughout the morning, while he set up the fruit and vegetable stand, his thoughts kept drifting back to Grandma Helena. What if it was something serious? He could barely focus on the few customers that morning, as a strong wind began to hint at an approaching storm. In the early afternoon, after closing the stand early due to the bad weather, Nolan returned home with a heavy heart. An unsettling feeling had followed him the entire way. When he entered the house, he found Grandma Helena lying on the couch, her eyes half closed and her breathing labored. "Grandma!" He rushed to her side, kneeling next to the couch. Grandma Helena seemed to be in pain, her skin even paler than in the morning, and her hands were cold. "Nolan, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nolan felt panic rising inside him. Without a second thought, he ran to the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the number of the nearest hospital. Every second of waiting felt like an eternity. "My grandmother, she's very ill. Please, we need an ambulance." His voice came out more desperate than he intended. He quickly gave the dispatcher all the necessary information and rushed back to Grandma Helena. He held her hand, squeezing it gently. The coldness of her skin only heightened his fear. "It's going to be okay, Grandma. They're on their way, all right? Hang in there." Grandma Helena slowly opened her eyes, her face marked with pain, but a faint smile appeared on her lips. "You've always been such a good boy, Nolan. I'm so proud of you," she said with difficulty. "Never forget that." Nolan couldn't hold back the tears welling up in his eyes. He tried to stay calm, but the thought of losing the only person he had in his life was terrifying. She was his only family, his protector, the one who loved him unconditionally. Finally, the sound of the ambulance siren broke the stillness of the afternoon. The paramedics quickly entered the house, assessed Grandma Helena and placed her on the stretcher. Nolan stayed by her side the entire time, refusing to let go of her hand. On the way to the hospital, the noise of the storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside Nolan. The wind whipped against the ambulance, and the torrential rain made it hard to see the road. He kept his eyes on his grandmother, struggling to hold back the tears, while his mind filled with questions. Would she survive? How could he live without her? When they arrived at the hospital, everything happened quickly. Grandma Helena was rushed into the emergency room, and Nolan was left in the waiting area. He sat down on a hard chair, feeling small and powerless. Outside, the storm seemed to intensify, thunder echoing like hammers in his chest, while the rain pounded violently against the windows. Every minute felt like an eternity. The constant sound of hurried footsteps from nurses and doctors in the corridor did nothing to calm his nerves. The uncertainty was suffocating. What if his grandmother didn't make it? What would become of him? After hours of waiting, a nurse with a serious expression finally approached Nolan. "Are you Helena's grandson?" she asked, and Nolan nodded, eager for news. "Your grandmother is stable for now. We've managed to stabilize her, but her condition is delicate. We need to run more tests and it seems she'll need surgery." "Surgery?" Nolan felt a knot form in his stomach. "Is she going to be okay?" The nurse hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "We'll do everything we can, but the surgery is urgent and will be expensive." Nolan could barely process the word expensive. He knew they barely had enough money for daily expenses. A surgery? How was he supposed to pay for something like that? Despair washed over him again. Selling fruits and vegetables by the roadside wasn't enough to save his grandmother's life. Sitting again in the waiting room, Nolan looked down at his empty hands. Outside, the storm raged on, but the chaos inside him was even greater. He wanted to be strong, as he had always tried to be, but now it felt like the world was falling apart. The grandmother he loved was in a hospital bed, and he had no way to help her. He closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears. He was alone, and for the first time, the future seemed frighteningly empty. Nolan felt the cold of the cement floor through the worn soles of his shoes as he walked away from the hospital, his head down and heart heavy. Grandma Helena was still hospitalized, and he didn't know if she would survive. The words "expensive surgery" echoed in his mind, an insurmountable barrier. With no one else to turn to and no money, the situation felt hopeless. Days later, reality proved even harsher. Without his grandmother at home and unable to care for himself, Nolan was sent to a local orphanage. The feeling of emptiness and abandonment clung to him as the social worker drove him to his new home. When they arrived, the orphanage looked even more depressing under the grey sky. It was an old building, with faded walls and windows that creaked as the wind pushed against them. Children ran through the courtyard, some laughing, others just watching from afar, curious about the arrival of the new boy. "Welcome, Nolan," said the director, a woman with a stern face but a hidden kindness in her eyes. "We know your situation isn't easy, but we're here to help." Nolan only nodded, still feeling the emptiness of being away from his grandmother. He was shown to his room, where 3 simple beds awaited him. The walls bore the marks of time, and the smell of mildew was faint but present. Despite this, the place wasn't entirely unwelcoming. Some of the boys who lived there smiled, trying to include Nolan in their conversations. But Nolan couldn't feel like he belonged there. All he wanted was to be with Grandma Helena, to see her recover. But now he was stuck here, unsure of how to move forward. In the days that followed, Nolan tried to adjust to life at the orphanage. He met Mr. Joan, the man in charge of the garden. He was a kind old man, with calloused hands and a sunburned face, who tended the small patch of land that the orphanage had. He spent hours there, working silently, until one day Nolan, not knowing what else to do, approached him. "Can I help?" Nolan asked, watching Mr. Joan turn the soil with a hoe. The man looked at him, surprised by the offer, but soon smiled. "Help is always welcome, boy. If you like working with the land, I'll teach you a few things." From that day on, Nolan started helping in the garden. The hard work kept him busy and distracted him from his painful thoughts. He learned how to plant, water, and harvest. The garden provided vegetables and fruits used to feed the orphans, and in some cases were sold at the local market to raise money for the orphanage. The silence between Nolan and Mr. Joan was comfortable, and over time the old gardener began to share his stories. He had lost his family many years ago, and like Nolan, had found purpose in working the land. "We always need a reason to keep going," Mr. Joan said one day while pulling weeds. "The land gives me that. Maybe it'll help you too, boy." Nolan listened to those words and, little by little, started to feel that even in a place he didn't want to be, something inside him was changing. There was a small hope growing, like the seeds he planted. But at the same time, he knew he needed something bigger. He wanted to become a doctor. That dream still lived inside him, but it seemed distant, almost impossible given the circumstances. Then, one Sunday afternoon, while Nolan was helping harvest some fruits, Mr. Joan made an unexpected proposal. "You know, Nolan, the market in town always needs fresh produce. I see how hard you work here. What do you think about taking some of these fruits to sell there? It's against the orphanage's rules, but I trust you. No one needs to know, and you can keep the money." Nolan's eyes widened. It was an opportunity, not only to earn some money but also to start forging his own path. He could use the money to study, maybe even help pay for his grandmother's surgery, if she still had a chance. I would love that," Nolan replied, trying to contain his excitement. "Thank you so much, Mr. Juan." From that moment on, Nolan began selling fruits in secret on Sundays at the town market. He woke up early, before the other boys at the orphanage were awake, and quietly carried the fruits they had harvested the day before. The market was a vibrant place, full of colors and aromas, and Nolan, with his humility and charm, quickly earned the trust of the vendors. At the end of the day, Nolan saved every penny he earned, always with the same thought in mind. One day he would become a doctor. The vendors, moved by the boy's determination, began supporting his dream. Sometimes they would buy what he couldn't sell, claiming they needed extra fruit, but Nolan knew it was a gesture of generosity. The days at the orphanage continued, and Nolan kept saving his money in secret. He thought of Grandma Helena every day, praying for her recovery. Even without news, he held on to the hope that somehow he would be able to help her. Mr. Juan, always observant, noticed something special in the boy. "You've got a rare determination, Nolan. Keep it up, you'll go far." Nolan wasn't sure if he would, but at that moment, he had a reason to keep fighting. Despite the sadness, a small spark of hope was beginning to light his path. It was a spring afternoon, the sun shining gently in the sky, and the orphanage was bustling with a special event. A group of donors was visiting, and all the children were excited. Nolan, however, felt out of place. He didn't like the attention that events like these brought, preferring the quiet of the garden and the discreet work he did on Sundays at the market. But today, he knew he had to be present. As the children gathered in the courtyard, Nolan leaned against a tree, watching from a distance. Soft music played in the background as the visitors toured the orphanage, admiring the facilities and chatting with the staff. He kept to himself, with no expectations. Then something unexpected happened. Among the crowd of adults and children, a girl walked past him, and Nolan felt as if time had stopped for a moment. Those eyes, that face. Luna. She looked much healthier, her cheeks rosy and her hair neatly arranged. Nothing like the disoriented girl he had helped months earlier on the roadside. Nolan froze for a moment, trying to process what he was seeing. Luna, on the other hand, was looking around distractedly until her gaze finally met Nolan's. For a second she hesitated, her eyes widening in surprise, and then with a wave of emotion, she ran towards him. "Nolan!" she exclaimed, unable to contain her joy. Before he could say anything, Luna wrapped him in a tight hug. Nolan, caught off guard, stood still for a few seconds, then slowly raised his arms and hugged her back. His heart raced, a mix of shock and happiness flooding him. "I knew I'd find you again someday," Luna said, her voice filled with emotion. "You saved me that day on the road. I'll never forget what you did for me." Nolan felt a warm rush through his chest. The memory of that day came back strongly. He had often wondered what had happened to Luna after she was taken by the police. Seeing her well, healthy, and so grateful brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. "It was nothing," he murmured shyly, still trying to process the reunion. But for Luna, it was far from nothing. She turned to a man watching the scene from afar. He had an imposing presence, with a curious expression on his face. Dr. Edward, Luna's father, one of the most respected doctors in the region. Luna ran to him, excitedly explaining who Nolan was. "Dad, this is the boy who saved my life that day. He gave me fruit when I was so sick. If it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened." Dr. Edward looked at Nolan with a mix of surprise and gratitude. He walked over to the boy and extended his hand. "So, you're Nolan?" the doctor said in a deep but kind voice. "My daughter has spoken about you many times. I don't even know how to thank you for helping Luna that day." Nolan, embarrassed, shook the man's hand, but couldn't find much to say. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the idea that he had saved someone still felt distant to him. Dr. Edward continued to study Nolan, as if something about him piqued his interest even more. He seemed intrigued, not just by Luna's story, but by something deeper. "You live here at the orphanage?" the doctor asked, glancing around. "Yes," Nolan replied, hesitating. "My grandmother is in the hospital. She got very sick. I don't have anyone else, so they brought me here." The mention of his grandmother stirred even more curiosity in Dr. Edward. He knew well the state of the orphanages and hospitals in the region and had dealt with many tough cases in his career, but this boy's story seemed even more delicate. "And how is your grandmother now?" Nolan looked down at the ground, the weight of the situation returning to his chest. "She needs surgery, but we don't have the money for it. They said it's expensive. I don't know what to do." Dr. Edward remained silent for a moment, his eyes evaluating the boy standing before him. He saw the determination in Nolan, something rare to find, especially in young people facing so many challenges. "You have a good heart, Nolan," the doctor said after a pause. "Not only did you save my daughter, but you're facing your own difficult situation with a strength that few people have. I'm going to help you." Nolan lifted his eyes, incredulous at what he had just heard. "I'm going to arrange your grandmother's surgery, and besides that," Dr. Edward continued, smiling slightly, "I want you to keep studying. Luna told me you dream of becoming a doctor. With your heart and dedication, you can be one of the best." The boy stood frozen. Dr. Edward's words echoed in his mind like a dream he never thought could come true. The help he so desperately needed for both his grandmother and his future was now right in front of him, and all because of a simple act of kindness on the side of the road. Luna smiled at him, happy to see him finally receiving the recognition he deserved. Nolan felt his eyes welling up with tears, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was a different emotion, something he had almost forgotten. Hope. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say, his voice choked with emotion. Dr. Edward placed a firm yet comforting hand on Nolan's shoulder. "You deserve it, son. And don't worry, from now on I'll be here for you." For the first time in a long while, Nolan felt his life, once so full of uncertainty and hardship, begin to change. And it all started with a simple act of kindness. The circle was complete. He had saved a life, and now his own life was about to be transformed. The days following the reunion with Luna and her father, Dr. Edward, were a whirlwind of emotions for Nolan. It was as if the heavy burden on his shoulders had lightened. He wasn't alone anymore. There was hope, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so frightening. Dr. Edward kept his promise. Within a few days, Grandma Helena's situation became a priority. Nolan couldn't hold back his tears when he found out that his grandmother would undergo surgery. The fear he had felt while watching her fade away in the hospital was replaced by overwhelming relief. The surgeon in charge was none other than Dr. Edward, who on top of everything covered the costs of the procedure. The care and concern the doctor showed for Nolan's grandmother touched the boy deeply. On the day of the surgery, Nolan sat nervously in the hospital waiting room, but for the first time there was a new feeling, hope. He knew his grandmother was in the best hands possible, and that calmed him, even though anxiety still churned in his stomach. He thought of the moments they had shared, the laughter and conversations, and wished with all his heart that she would have more time to live. More time for them to create new memories together. Time seemed to drag on as Nolan glanced repeatedly at the clock. The hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors echoed through the halls, and for a moment, everything felt like the chaos of when his grandmother had first fallen ill. But this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Edward, who occasionally stopped by the waiting room to reassure Nolan, remained calm and confident. Finally, after what felt like days, the surgery ended. Dr. Edward, with a gentle smile on his face, approached Nolan. "Everything went well, Nolan. Your grandmother will need time to recover, but she's out of danger." The boy felt such a deep sense of relief that his knees nearly gave out. The gratitude he felt was so overwhelming that he could hardly find the words. Grandma Helena was saved. I don't even know how to thank you, Dr. Edward," Nolan said, his eyes filling with tears. You saved my grandmother's life." Dr. Edward looked at the boy with understanding and pride. "You already did your part when you saved my daughter's life, Nolan. Now it's my turn to give back." He paused, studying the young man in front of him. "But beyond that, there's something about you, something that makes me believe you can go much further. The world needs more people like you." Nolan was surprised by his words. To feel valued by someone so important was new to him. And hearing that he had the potential to become a doctor made the dream that once seemed unreachable feel much closer. It was the kind of encouragement he never imagined receiving from such a respected figure. "I know life hasn't been easy for you," Dr. Edward continued, "but don't let the difficulties extinguish your dreams. If you really want to become a doctor, I can help you, not just with studies, but with guidance and opportunities. You have something special, Nolan, and I want to see you realize that potential." Nolan remained silent for a few moments, absorbing everything he had just heard. The weight of Dr. Edward's words settled on him, a mixture of emotion and responsibility. He knew that becoming a doctor was his greatest dream, and now he had a real chance to make it come true. But he also knew the road ahead would be tough. "I want to be a doctor," Nolan said, his voice firm. "I want to help people just like you helped me. I want to make a difference." Dr. Edward smiled, pleased with the boy's determination. "And you will succeed, Nolan. I'll be by your side to make sure of it." Nolan spent the following days by his grandmother's side, who, although still weak, showed clear signs of improvement. Every time he entered the hospital room and saw Grandma Helena awake, his eyes sparkled with relief and love. She still had a long road to recovery, but the worst was behind them. One afternoon, as Nolan sat by her side, holding her hand, Grandma Helena looked at him with a tired but tender smile. "You've always been my hope, Nolan. Ever since you were little, I knew you would do great things. I knew you had a special heart." Nolan gently squeezed her hand, trying to hold back the emotion rising in his throat. "And you've always been my strength, Grandma. Everything I am is because of you." Grandma Helena smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. She knew Nolan was growing up, and that his future was bright, but she also knew he would face challenges bigger than he could ever imagine. Yet something inside her told her he was ready, that he had the strength to face whatever came his way. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "never lose your kindness. That's your greatest gift to the world." Nolan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The kindness he carried had guided him this far, and now he knew it would be his greatest ally on the journey to achieving his dreams. When Grandma Helena was finally discharged and returned home, Dr. Edward remained a constant presence in Nolan's life. He frequently visited the fruit and vegetable stand after his shifts, buying produce as a gesture of gratitude, but also as a symbol of their growing friendship and mutual respect. The bond between them deepened. Nolan continued helping with the orphanage's garden, selling fruits at the market on Sundays, and every coin he saved had one purpose: to study and become a doctor. The road would be long and difficult, but now he knew he wasn't alone. He had his grandmother, Dr. Edward, and an unshakable determination guiding him. The fresh morning breeze rustled the leaves of the trees as Nolan arranged the fruits at his grandmother's stand. Grandma Helena, still fragile, sat beside him, smiling as she watched her grandson care for the small stall. Although her body was still recovering, her spirit was light. The surgery had been a success, and the life that once seemed full of uncertainties now carried a glimpse of hope. Nolan looked down the dirt road with a new feeling. He had spent so much time there, waiting for customers, thinking about the future, wondering what his life would be like. Now something had changed. He had a purpose, a dream that once seemed impossible, but was now slowly becoming a reality. Every Sunday, he still sold fruits and vegetables at the city market. The vendors, always generous, continued to buy his produce, knowing his determination to save money for his studies. They knew about Nolan's dream of becoming a doctor and made sure to support him whenever they could. The market wasn't just a place to make a living, it was a symbol of his persistence and how a simple act of kindness had sparked a series of life-changing events. During the week, Nolan continued studying harder than ever, True to his promise, Dr. Edward was always there, guiding him with books, conversations, and encouragement. He would take Nolan to the hospital occasionally to show him the environment, giving him a glimpse of the future he so desperately wanted. Each visit strengthened his desire to become a doctor and help others just as he had helped Luna. Months passed, and the routine at the orphanage also began to change. Nolan was now known as the boy who wanted to be a doctor, and his kindness and dedication spread among the staff and children. Mr. Juan, always observant, watched with pride as the boy grew, knowing he was on the right path. One day, the orphanage organized a big event, a celebration to thank the donors and supporters of the institution. It was an opportunity for the orphans to showcase their talents and for the community to recognize the importance of the place. As always, Nolan stayed away from the spotlight, but that afternoon something special was about to happen. Luna appeared again, this time accompanied by Dr. Edward. She smiled when she saw Nolan and quickly ran to hug him. There was now a strong friendship between them, a connection that could never be broken. They had started this journey together, and Luna would always be grateful for what Nolan had done for her. But that afternoon it was Dr. Edward who had something more important to say. "Nolan," the doctor said, approaching with his usual gentle smile, "we have a surprise for you." Nolan, always humble, furrowed his brow, curious and a bit wary. He never expected anything in return for his kindness. "A surprise?" he asked, unsure of what was happening. Dr. Edward nodded but paused, glancing at the other donors present at the event. He then pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Nolan. "This is the result of your hard work, Nolan. Everyone here has recognized your dedication, your generous heart, and your dream of becoming a doctor. That's why we've decided it's time for you to take the next step." Nolan opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter of acceptance for a full scholarship to a prestigious pre-medical preparatory school. He could hardly believe what he was reading. His eyes scanned the page again, as if he needed to confirm that it was real. I did it," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Dr. Edward smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You didn't just do it, Nolan. You earned this. Everyone here believes in your potential. This is only the beginning of your journey." Nolan couldn't hold back the tears. He had faced so many hardships, so many moments of doubt and fear, but now he stood before the realization of a dream that once seemed so far away. The kindness he had shown on that road, helping a stranger, had changed everything. The vendors who had bought his fruit, Mr. Juan with his patient guidance in the garden, Dr. Edward and Luna, and even his grandmother, everyone had been a part of his transformation. They had believed in him when he had struggled to believe in himself. And now, with the letter in his hands, Nolan could finally see that the future was within his reach. That night, Grandma Helena hugged him tightly, her voice filled with pride as she told him how proud she was of him. Nolan felt the warmth of her embrace, knowing that everything he did was for her, for all the love she had given him over the years. She was his strength, his reason to keep going. From that day forward, Nolan's life took a new path. He continued to work hard, both at the market and in his studies, but now with even greater focus. The doors were opening, and he was ready to walk through them. Dr. Edward remained a constant presence, guiding Nolan and ensuring he had everything he needed to succeed. He knew that the boy who had started out as an orphan selling fruit would become something much greater, and Nolan, with his heart full of gratitude and determination, was more than ready for the challenge. Looking back, Nolan understood that his success didn't come from grand heroic deeds, but from small acts of kindness and perseverance. Every decision, every act of generosity, and every difficult moment faced with courage had shaped the young man he had become. And now he was ready to fulfill his dream, knowing that no matter what the future held, his kindness and determination would always be his greatest tools. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more touching stories like this one. Your support helps us share more meaningful content. Thank you for watching.